much for joining us this evening for this wonderful exhibition, Elixir, exquisite exhibition, shall we say, by Claire Beauseins. It is, how many exhibitions do you have now?
I've done over 20, but not all of them here. But
why not? No, it's a wonderful show, and we're so happy to have Claire here. She made the trip over from Victoria with her entourage, it seems. Yeah. in their hundreds, including a partner, Pete, who kindly refers to himself as her handbag. A very glamorous handbag. But this is a beautiful exhibition that explores a whole heap of mediums that only Claire can do, and intricate techniques, including wild silk cocoons, which she explored last year in a piece called Chalice. And that just happened to win her the prestigious Mandorla Award. So, yes, big congrats. So we congratulate you, Claire. Look, I mean, you're clearly an artist at the top of your game, and this is just an exquisite piece of work. Thank you.
thank you.
And continue, yeah, thank you. Continuing on the Mandorla theme, we're delighted to have with us a wonderful lady. Now, I'm going to get this right, because your titles are long. Dr. Angela McCarthy, Adjunct Senior Lecturer at the University of Notre Dame, Australia, and Chairperson of the Mandorla Art Award. So, very appropriate. Please welcome Angela. I'll get out there.
Thank you very much, Gary. Certainly wonderful to be here. On Tuesday I had the great pleasure of having about an hour of Claire's time in this gallery, in this space, looking at these beautiful works and listening to the stories and the exploration that Claire has carried on to produce all of these works. What she has used are things from the natural world, so ink, carbon or graphite, water, cocoons, indigo dye, thread, and washi paper that's made from mulberry bush. So the very act of making the paper, not that Claire's going to do that, but the beautiful making of the paper itself is an art. So all of these things are anchored in the created world, and they are therefore, because of that, all these things, the cocoons obviously, and the ink, the various inks that are used in the indigo, that all holds together this exhibition because of that beauty. Following, as was said just recently, following a beautiful piece, Chalice, that won the Mandorla Award last year, there was no argument about the winning work. It was really obvious to the judges. So Claire has taken that same idea of the cocoons and has now developed it in an outstanding way. John Henry Newman, for those of you who are familiar with him, said, "To live is to change, and to be perfect is to have changed often. Growth is the only evidence of life." And I think that perfectly explains some of the things that are happening in this room. Claire embodies this in her work. She also embodies deep spiritual connections, and that echoes the change that we see. So sometimes there is an element of letting go because she can't control some of the process, particularly in using the suminagashi and the floating indigo. You can't actually control what the ink does to a perfect extent. You have to go with that. And to go with that means you have to let go, you have to move into the process. And that's a very brave thing to do. So it allows the spirit to work, and this way of being brave, I think, reflects Claire's personality. The other thing is she goes deeply into spiritual and personal matters. So these works have the capacity to take you somewhere else if you spend the time and allow the work to speak to you. One of the things that Claire and I have spoken about is, like, tonight she's giving birth to all of these works. They leave her, but you and I continue to have that conversation. So we continue to have the conversations with the works, and one of them I'm going to take home, so I'm going to continue. When we look at I wanted to particularly look at these 4 works. These ones, Resonance 1, 2, 3 and 4. There is a beautiful sense, even in this really spontaneous kind of method, Claire has been able to get a sense in each of them of ripples moving. So there is something that has happened a long way beyond this that has caused these things to happen, and you have this exquisite movement. And into the detail of that, there's many pathways. So these beautifully stitched colours and silver thread in here indicates those pathways. So if you let yourself go into that, this sense of something that is well and truly beyond yourself that has caused a difference. This also references what John Henry Newman says, you know, we have to change, and as human beings we can choose that. In the animal world, they can't choose to change, they choose to be. But in our world, as humans, we choose to change, and that is an extraordinary thing. So there's a spiritual power in this that is the beyond, that goes into something that's beyond. And when you look at the 4 of them together and you see that ripple effect, there's something outside that is not limited by the physical, actual piece of wood. It's something beyond that. So that pebble has been dropped some way off, and it's an entity that draws humankind, us, into the future. So Claire and I had this conversation about the inexpressible and the invisible power that's sought in every human culture, and that is culturally expressed differently by different human groups. Christians call that entity God. In Islam, you call it Allah. And for Jewish people, there are a number of names, but the sacred name that can never be uttered is written as YHWH, which is called the Tetragrammaton. That's the sacred name of God. In Eastern religions, there are names and symbols that lead to the divine, and Claire's taken rubbings. There's some over here. There's more around, taking rubbings from a Buddhist table. And the carvings in that table are very specific symbols that relate to the religious tenets of Buddhism. She's also used calligraphy from the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra. So I had a closer look at your calligraphy today, because I'm very much into Christian calligraphy, but this is new and different. And if you have a close look, there's extraordinary detail in each of the characters. Not because it's not an ink mark, it's graphite. So that makes really quite a substantial difference. For various religious groups, actually writing and moving these characters and placing them onto pages is a really extraordinary meditative activity. So it's an important activity. And they reveal actually working with it, and like this one particularly down here, number 6, working with that calligraphy across the page. It's meditative and it's reflective, and it refers to a stillness, a space of that unknown entity. It's also identified in the power of melting of the water, the work of water created in the world. It's so interesting about water and about our bodies and about what happens, and so much of this here has a relationship in some way to water, whether that's the way of the process, how it's printed, or whether what it describes. The work over there is melting icebergs, and the melting of them is a very frightening thing in today's world. But it's also, if you've been mesmerised by that, seen images on documentaries where the icebergs collapse and how powerful that is, but how frightening it is, but also how incredibly beautiful. The colours are really quite astounding. Then there's the Elixir ones, and this exhibition called Elixir. Of course, the elixir is that potion that's, you know, the elixir of ageless being or whatever, but you're ageless anyway. Golden elixir here, and then elixir there, and then quench over there. I see them really clearly as a deeply emotive part. So this beautiful gold, and get close to it and really look carefully, the sheen of these beautiful, unique pieces. The cocoons, there's not a single one that's the same as another. They are unique. In this one over here, in Elixir, it's the tears that are pouring down. This echoes our suffering, our humanness. To be human is to suffer, None of us get through unscathed. If we do, we haven't lived. So the beautiful veil that's interacting with the flowing of the tears. I read once that tears of the human person differ according to what they are. If they're tears of anger, they are chemically a different constitution to tears of grief and for tears of happiness. So I've never tested that myself, but I think it's a really happy thought that our body echoes really specifically in the water. So the tears are evident, but there's that beautiful gold veil that is a comfort. And then over here in this one, the number 13, that one is called quench. And so there's that sense that the tears are lessening, it is being quenched. That beautiful mapping with the cocoons. Again, if you look up closely, the way the light is, you can see that the edges are all very, very lacy, because that's the shadow of this beautiful, beautiful fabric. And of course echoing Claire's heritage in lace makers, from lace makers, which is very beautiful. So very, very special. The cocoons themselves, they symbolise the freedom of the silk moth. It's had to really struggle to release itself, and when it does release itself in that transformation, the action of it makes it extremely vulnerable. In those first little while after it's emerged from the cocoon, after it's busted out, it's wet and it has to wait till it's dry before it has the strength to fly. So incredibly vulnerable moment for the silk moth. So when you think about that, there's a beautiful one here, 64, what's it called? 64 Dreams of Flight. Every one of those, looking carefully at each one of those cocoons, they are amazingly different. And if you see too, the difference in colour, in some of them, Claire had, like this one over here, it almost looks like Stairway to Heaven at Broome with the moon on the water. How the central ones are lighter, there's such a variation, but always anchored in gold. In ancient Christian iconography, and not just in Christian iconography, but in other religious groups as well, gold represents the divine, because gold is an extraordinary medium that doesn't blend easily with anything else. Also, if you happen to be in a room that's darkened, but there's gold there, gold receptacles or gold jewellery, you'll see it. You'll see the gold. The gold will pick up whatever light is in the room and reflect it. So gold is commonly used as representing the divine. And in this, I see the beauty of love that's imaged there. So the display in this is like, the silk moth has had to change is to be human, to change often is to be perfect and keep on growing, which is wonderful. So from the quote I used before, this process also symbolises the way that we have to change as human beings, not just once, not just maybe, but many times, and work towards that perfection. And that perfection is an embodiment of love. It is therefore my great pleasure to declare that this exhibition is open.
And I believe Claire would like to say a few words.
Yeah, just a few.
Just a few. That's enough.
I'd like to thank Linton and Gary and all of the crew here in Linton Cave Galleries have supported me so much over the years, much appreciated. And the people who have travelled from family and friends from interstate and from Broome, and the beautiful Peter, who's been promoted to PA. Yeah, so this is probably my most ambitious exhibition to date, because I've worked with 2 new mediums and combined and mixed up and played around, and I hope you enjoy what I've come up with. Thank you.
Yeah.